There we go. Okay.
Do we have any attendees or? Oh, there they
Looks
are.
like there's 1,
Maybe.
2,
Oh, they're coming in. Right.
3. Oh,
Oh, there they are.
am I chairing this meeting again?
I think so.
Okay. Should we wait a minute or two or go ahead and get started?
I think we get started. We have a quorum. We know that Dwayne's going to be late. We know that Roberta's out. So let us commence December 2nd meeting.
I did just want to mention, Mark, there was a little bit of confusion last time for people that called in via phone instead of using the webinar. For the people on the phone, we do have everybody muted that has called in or has joined the webinar. And when we get to public comment period, that's when we will unmute you and give you a chance to speak. So if you're on the phone and trying to talk to us, we can't hear you, but that's on purpose. And then we will let you speak during public comment period after the presentations are done.
Okay, great. All right, well, with that, then I will call the meeting to order. And can we start with roll call, please, Annette?
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Committee Member Daris,
Here.
Committee Member Newsom.
Here.
Committee Member Baranek.
Here.
For the record, Committee Member Anderson may be late and Chairperson Fonzie is an excused absence.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I so move.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Heather, second by Emily. Roll call, please.
Committee Member Newsom,
Yes.
Committee Member Baranek,
Yes.
Committee Member Daris.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay. All right, so this is, I'm going to open up public comment for items not on the agenda. I don't have the verbiage here, so I'll go by memory. If there's anybody online that wishes to speak to this committee and staff on an item that's not on this agenda, now is the time for that. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name for the record. And we will possibly place this on an agenda at a later date. So do we know if anybody wants to speak to the committee on something not on the agenda?
So if there is anybody out there on the webinar, on the phone, on the webinar, you can use the raise hand function. And if you're on the phone, you can press *9.
Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment and ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar. Oh, okay, Heather motioned and
I'll second.
Will second, okay. And you know, I don't think we need to do roll call. This isn't like planning commission or city council. So all in favor, say aye.
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 All right, consent calendar passes. Okay, so we have one item on the agenda, and it's the mixed use project at El Camino in Santa Barbara. And well, first, any ex parte that we need to announce before we get started. I have none.
I have ex parte.
Yeah, since the last meeting. You, Emily, have you talked to anybody since the last meeting?
No.
Okay, all right. So no ex parte for the three of us. And now staff will listen to your report.
Thank you. Phil, you're muted. But I see your mouth moving.
Thank you. Kelly, before you jump in, I just want to say something for the benefit of the audience that this design review committee meeting is a early conceptual review of the project and one of several upcoming opportunities to review this project, which will include another design review committee meeting following this if the project keeps moving forward, and subsequently a planning commission and city council hearing. So for those of you concerned that this may be the only opportunity to comment on this project, it is absolutely not. I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that this is a very early stage of the conceptual design of this project, as it's still in that phase of figuring out what design the applicants are going to go with. So anyway, with that, Kelly Gleason is going to gladly show you the ins and outs and details of the concepts, and so we can have a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the second time that we've heard this project. We were here about a month ago to review it the first time and gather some information. I do have a lot of slides about the background that I left in there just in case anybody has questions on that, but I will move through those fairly quickly as they are a repeat from last time, and we can always go back and revisit those at a later time in the meeting. So this project is a mixed-use general plan designation. It's zoned commercial retail. It's within the original Dove Creek development, which encompassed the entire site, including the residential and the open space areas. It has a PV12 overlay zone on it. It's about 5 acres. So Dove Creek was designed in 2002, and that's when the zoning and the breakup of the residential and commercial portion happened. And the commercial parcel has remained vacant since that time. What the applicants are proposing as part of their project is an amendment to the master plan of development that was originally approved in 2002 with the Dove Creek project. The zoning designations and general plan designations are to remain the same. So it is just that master plan of development amendment. And then along with that, there may be some changes to the plan development language that need to happen as we move forward with the project and figure out exactly what the details are going to be. So this is the existing master plan of development for the commercial site. It had about 60,000 square foot of retail on the elevated pad that exists today. So the applicants proposed a couple concepts. 2 concepts came before us at the meeting in November. And since then, they've been working on a 3rd concept that speaks to some of the concerns and likes that the residents and DRC brought up about the project the first time we saw it. So as a recap, concept 1 and 2 both have about 80 residential units, a 100-room hotel, and about 37,000 square foot of retail and restaurant space around a central courtyard. If you recall, the difference between concepts 1 and 2 were how that central courtyard were designed. Concept 3 includes about 66 residential units, a 112-room hotel, and about 15,000 square foot of retail restaurant space. So this is just a recap of concept 1 and 2 that we saw last time. You'll see the central plaza area there, and then building A is the hotel with the lobby and banquet space, and then some retail uses. There's residential lining Cashin and Bliss streets. There was hotel units above ground floor retail at the intersection of Cashin and El Camino Real, and then there was an apartment building at the intersection of Bliss and Santa Barbara Road. Between 1 and 2, one of the central plaza spaces had a pool that was to be used by the hotel and was envisioned maybe to be used also by the residents of Dove Creek. And then the second concept was basically more of an outdoor park area space that could serve the retail uses surrounding it. So again, in terms of the resort spaces, there was a pool on the courtyard level with showers, cabanas, and a poolside bar. There was beer garden, outdoor dining spaces, and non-permanent vendors. And then idea B was similar, but without the pool basically, and had an amphitheater built into it. So since then, the applicants have put together a 3rd concept. Again, this is very preliminary. They haven't had much time to put this together. But they did want to come forward with an additional alternative. So what they've done in concept 3 is they've changed those apartment buildings and the building with retail and hotel at the intersection to more residential buildings that would be similar to the other ones lining Cashin and Bliss streets. They've also removed the top floor from the E and the D buildings. So they've reduced everything by 1 story, which is about 9 to 10 feet. And then they've shifted building A farther away from the existing neighborhood and toward El Camino Real and Santa Barbara Road. So you can see this is just an example of those E buildings, which are the ones directly lining the residential existing neighborhood streets. So the top elevation is the 3-story design, and then that middle one sort of shades the area that was removed. And then that bottom elevation is showing what they're envisioning for those buildings in concept 3. And again, this is building D, which are those slightly more interior buildings. So originally in concepts 1 and 2, it is a 4-story design. And then if they remove that 4th story with concept 3, you can see the elevation down at the bottom is what you end up with. So this is just a view from Wixon Way, sort of where that comes into Cashin Street. so that you can kind of see the difference. The top is concepts 1 and 2. So you can see off to the left that hotel building with the retail below, and then you can see sort of the main tower of the larger hotel building A down that central drive entrance there. And then on the lower image, you can see that everything's been brought down approximately 1 story, and then moving that hotel building back towards El Camino Real and Santa Barbara. You don't see that prominent tower feature and that height off of that central access drive. The architectural theme, as we presented last time, is mission style. So it has a light stucco finish with tile roofs, some arched windows, and some wrought iron accents. And what we're really looking for is some direction on neighborhood compatibility. So that includes the building height, the interface between the existing residences and the project site, and the architectural theme before they move too far out of their concept stage of project development. They'd like some direction to know which way to go in order to be able to make that finding when it goes forward for review by these Planning Commission and City Council. So height is an issue that we heard before from the neighborhood. I've just updated this chart to include the height for concept 3. And again, concept 3 is in its very preliminary stage of development. And so these are kind of estimates at this point and will need to be further refined. But we can see that building A has remained the same in the concept, it's just moved location. They have eliminated buildings B and C in concept 3. And then the D and E buildings have come down about 9 to 10 feet from what they were before. So in terms of next steps, so this is one of our very first DRC meetings where we're asking for preliminary input so that the applicants know what direction to take as they dive further into their design. We'll have to do some staff analysis, which hasn't really been completed yet, and some CEQA analysis to address traffic, noise, and air quality. We'll likely have another DRC meeting or 2 as the design gets refined to come back and check in on direction and neighborhood compatibility. And then when that's all done, we'll move forward to Planning Commission and City Council. So in terms of why we're here today, we're asking for some DRC input on the building height, scale, and massing, the architectural theme and detailing, and the overall site design concept. And that does conclude staff's presentation. We can go back and revisit any of those slides. I know we went through some of the background stuff quickly, and I know that the applicant is also attending the webinar and is available to speak and answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Heather or Emily, do you have any questions for staff before we get to the applicant?
None at this time.
None? Okay. All right, well, then at this
Not
time,
yet.
I'll open to for public comment, but we'll start with the applicant for a presentation or any comments that they'd like to lead us off with.
Okay, thank you. This is Mariah. I'm going to allow Ted Lawton to talk now.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm not seeing that it's doing anything.
I see his name up there twice.
Yeah.
Mariah, Luke's right next to me if you want me to grab him.
Yes,
Oh.
please.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah. Oh, now he's gone. Maybe he's calling back.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
It is.
Hey, Luke. So Ted Lawton, who's the applicant, he was just here. I pressed, can you hear me?
Yes.
And I pressed allow to talk, but nothing was happening. So I don't know if I missed
Okay,
something.
did he call in from a phone or did he connect from a computer or a smartphone?
It looked like it was probably a computer. He's probably calling back, I would assume.
Yeah, if it's on a, if he's calling from a phone, it'll have a phone number. If it has his name, most likely he's connecting from a computer.
Mm-hmm.
So he's no longer in the list. Is he? Let me swing back up to my desk and I can join as an admin. And I'll see if I can notice anything going on.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll be right back.
Good.
Okay, thank you. You just happen to be in the right place.
All right, technical difficulties, but we'll pause here until we can figure out to get, I think Ted should go first, at the very least anyway.
Okay, let's see. It looks like he's back on, so I'm going to try it again.
All right.
Are we on? Are we live?
You are
Ted,
live.
we can hear you now.
Hey, sorry everyone. We just experienced a power outage, so we had to think quick, and now we're logged in on a hotspot. So hopefully this works for you guys. Not sure how good the hotspot's how effective it'll be, but we'll give it a try. We did have a presentation. Is there a way for us to share our screen? Can you?
Yes, let me figure that out.
Well, welcome, Dwayne.
Hello.
Ted, is that the same presentation you emailed over? If you're not successful to share it, we could share that, what you emailed over to us as well.
They didn't get the same presentation. So yeah, unfortunately, we have it on our computer. I think you just do a share screen.
Yeah, it's not
There we go.
letting me see that PowerPoint presentation to share. Let me close my presentation and maybe that would help. All right, this should work.
And that probably should mark for the
Yeah.
record too, that committee member Anderson is now here.
So
I got it. Thank you.
hey, Kelly,
Yes.
we actually sent one like 5 or 10 minutes. So this is the old one.
Okay.
We actually have one that we just resent.
Okay, let me
This is perfect. Thank you.
try and get there. I think that's the one I opened, but let's see.
It's something we just forwarded to you.
Ted, you're moving, you're really slowly, your voice.
Oh no, I think it's our connection. Let me check to see where we're at.
Does that look right?
No. Is there a way to allow us to share our screen? Does that work?
Let me see, that was the one in the email, but let me try and open the PDF. Maybe the PDF is different. The PDF looks the same.
How long ago did you send over the email, Ted? I have the email from 12:30, but I don't have an additional one.
Yeah, there's one at like 2,
Oh,
around like
okay.
2:05.
Okay.
It was a forward.
Oh, I see.
Perfect. Here we go. Yay. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate your patience here.
Sure. We're still not seeing your screen yet, though.
I am bringing it up. Mariah, am I sharing the screen or is Ted?
I think
Uh, can't, there's no option, maybe Luke can chime in, but I don't see an option to allow Ted to share his screen.
Okay, I can do it. I'm just waiting for the file to download real quick.
The challenges of remote meetings.
Yeah.
One of the most difficult ones in DRC.
Okay.
And if you
You're with us,
prefer,
please.
this is Luke. If you would prefer Ted to present, we can make him a panelist. And
I
then he'll
think-
share his screen as an attendee. He can only speak.
There it
think
is.
We've got what we need.
All right.
All right, perfect.
Success.
All right.
Can you make sure they can hear you without disconnection or slow?
Yeah, is our feed still good?
Yeah, we can hear, I can hear you just fine.
It's good
Oh,
right
perfect.
now.
All right, Kelly, if you don't mind just going to slideshow and just pressing play.
I am attempting to do that. On my screen, it's a slideshow. On the shared screen, it's not.
I see it. We actually see the first page.
Do you see it as a slideshow?
We just see it as the outlines.
Okay.
Yeah, this is fine. We could just do this.
Well, okay. I don't know if I'll be able to advance it because I'm in a.
What if you go and click on slide 2? Will that advance for us?
Yeah, it'll work that way. Yes.
Perfect. So we could just keep it in this format and do it that way.
Okay.
Thank you. That's perfect. And it's pretty brief. Really, what we wanted to do is share today a little bit about design and about the success of the project that we're proposing. As everyone is aware, the traditional shopping center design that we've seen for many years is just not very viable anymore. There's a lot of issues with vacancies. Brick and mortar is being challenged by the Amazon effect, which we talked about last time. So it's really important that the project we're proposing, in order to make sure that we get the commercial and retail success of the project, we're going to have to really focus on some key factors. And we wanted to touch on those briefly just to make sure, we're all in alignment in some ways about what's going to help this design be successful. So the first is quality. The quality of the design is paramount. We absolutely have to differentiate this project from other projects, especially when it comes to the retail shopping centers of Atascadero and Central Coast, as well as the hotels. Right now, if we're going to have a hotel that looks, feels like Holiday Inn Express, Marriott, or Hampton Inn, which you find all up and down the 101 corridor, our hotel is DOA, before we even get started. And that hotel is not going to be able to compete against these other hotels because there's already a large saturation of them in the marketplace. What our hotel has to do to be successful is be different. It has to be different in a way based on quality and experience. So what I'm saying is that right now, if you're going to think about staycation, so local people, maybe you don't want to get on an airplane, but you want to stay locally. I don't see many people wanting to go to Hampton Suites, Marriott, or Holiday Inn Express to have a staycation. So just trying to give an idea that this particular project and hotel, it needs to become a point of destination. It needs to be it needs to differentiate itself from all the other neighboring hotels in SLO County, especially the ones that I just spoke about, that there's one in every city, right? There are 2 in every city, or 3 in San Luis Obispo's case. Next, I wanted to focus on was we really need to emphasize the experiential indoor and outdoor public amenities and public space. It needs to be a place where you're going to want to spend half a day. And the way we do that is by allowing different opportunities for experience, whether it's splash pads or beer gardens, just things that you're going to want to go and spend time on the weekends at, or even after work. So that's super important that we create this experiential environment. Next, I want to say is it needs to be a placemaker, a space maker, where again, you're going to want to go. It's got to have that attractor factor, if you will. Food is going to be very important. We need to have some variety. It needs to have a little bit of a food court kind of feel component to it. So there's a draw. So you can go with a group of friends or your family and know that you can get 2 or 3 different kinds of food that are going to be, something that everybody's going to want. You can satisfy more than just one person's like, if you will. Next is it has to have excellent parking, right? There has to be excellent parking availability. That's the one thing that I believe the site we're proposing has, opposed to downtown San Luis Obispo or downtown Pismo, and even sometimes downtown Paso kind of gets a little crowded. I've experienced it on a Friday night. You got to park 2 or 3 blocks away from the place you want to go to, which I'm not opposed to walking, but for us to be able to compete, it has to have excellent parking availability. Next is we want to have surrounding residents living on site. Why? Because they're going to be the ones that are most likely going to walk down and grab a bite to eat or use any of the other services, commercial services that are available on site. Next is going to be key that it's pedestrian friendly, bike friendly. So not only people living on site, but people living around the area have an opportunity to get on a bike and get out of a car and walk and access the site. And then lastly, we already talked about the traditional shopping center designs. They're no longer viable. And unfortunately, that's what you have approved or entitled 20 years ago. Well, maybe it might have worked 20 years ago. It hasn't, and I don't think it's going to work 20 years from now. So what we're proposing, we're trying to create the best of both worlds. We're trying to give you a shopping center in a sense, but it's more of a modern kind of shopping center based on experience. Next, I want to move along to this slide. And really what I wanted to show here is, and you may have seen this in a letter that we had sent, I think a week or 2 ago, but I wanted to show you at the north end of town, the other bookend, right? We have the southern bookend is what we're talking about. On the northern bookend of Atascadero by Del Rio, you have this classic California Mission. I think it's even called Mission Oaks Plaza is up there, beautiful Mission style. And then across the street on the other side, north side of Del Rio, you've got your modern contemporary hotel. I think this is Home 2 Suites. And I want to move on to the next slide, please. This just gives you a context for, they're literally right across the street from one another. And I'm just trying to point this out when it comes to the neighborhood compatibility component, that you have 2 very differentiating designs very close to one another along your El Camino corridor on the northern bookend. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. This next slide shows, so what we did is we went up and down El Camino Real, and we kind of picked about a half a dozen or a dozen sites along the El Camino corridor. And the one style that we saw predominantly as we drove from the very southern end to the very northern end is Mission style is spread all throughout the El Camino corridor. That's the one consistent style that we experienced. Move on to the next slide. This gives you more. You got Adobe Plaza, you got Plaza Pueblo, you have I think it's Viandes or Viandes. Literally you drive up and down El Camino corridor. And again, the one consistent style that we see is Mission. Not saying that it's all beautiful. The Moose Lodge looks like it needs a little work, but it is very consistent along El Camino corridor, which honestly makes sense based on Atascadero's history and being on El Camino, right? Let's move on to the next slide, please. And so the reason why I'm bringing that up is, so that's, if we take a look at the entire El Camino corridor and what we see as far as a consistent design theme, let's look a little bit closer. Let's zoom in to just the southern end of Atascadero, right there, that bookend at let's call it Dove Creek, if you will, El Camino and Santa Barbara. So basically, if you look around the Dove Creek site, what you see is a mobile home park. You see the Renew apartments. You see the Bordeaux apartments. You see a geodesic dome. You see kind of an A-frame structure. I don't know why it's called Dove Creek. That should be Dove Creek Church. And then there's the Palomar. I think it's Palomar Creek Liquor Store. So as far as design compatibility, this whole southern end of town is kind of a mixed hodgepodge of all these different types of designs and projects. And really looking at Atascadero, your southern bookend is your high density area. If you look at all of Atascadero, all the projects that's been done, this portion of town is the highly concentrated, high density projects that you have. So the reason why I bring that up is I'm just trying to give context to what it is that we're doing and the way that we see our compatibility with the southern bookend of Atascadero, why we think the project does fit. So let's move on to the next slide, please. And so since our last meeting, we took into consideration some of the DRC's kind of concerns. And then we also had some opportunity to meet with some of the residents, not all the residents, but we tried to solicit feedback to get some ideas about what it is that they're concerned about and what are some of the things they'd like to see. We had some participation, which was great. And based on the feedback that we received from both DRC and from the community, we found the following, or we made the following adjustments, improvements. And the first was we reduced all perimeter building heights to 2 stories to the adjacent neighborhood on Cash and Bliss. Second is we reduced all 4-story interior building heights down to 3 stories. We moved all commercial use into the interior of the plaza away from the adjacent neighborhood. So all the commercial use is going to be hidden on the interior of the site. And we also moved the hotel from the furthest southeast corner of Santa Barbara and El Camino, away from the Dove Creek residential neighborhood the best we could. This is as far as we could push it. Again, we did that to help minimize any kind of potential shadowing, any kind of issues with bulk and scale. Now you won't see as much of the hotel. That was the theory and thinking behind that. But we also increased the interior park and plaza by over 90%. And what's so fantastic about that is originally we presented 2 options. One was a park option. One was more of a community resort, kind of community pool. Now we can get both and even have more space for outdoor community gathering. Next, we eliminated all the apartment buildings on the project. We reduced our residential count by 16. Kelly read 80 units. We actually are down to 64 residential units. And we eliminated all the palm trees and landscaping that didn't really fit Atascadero. Again, we're not looking for an Orange County look. We don't want that. We don't want this place to be Orange County. It's not. And so we made those landscaping adjustments. Next slide. Kelly, you're really good at this, by the way. Wow. So based on our November 4th DRC kind of questions and items in review, we wanted to respond was, I think, Council Member Fonzie had asked about affordable housing. Right now, we would say of the 64 units, 20 of those units would be dedicated to moderate or below. The moderate pricing stands at studios are $349, 1 beds are $403, 2 beds are $456, and 3 beds are $510, based on the most recent November SLO county affordability standards. Next, we are looking at all exterior building lights to be downward facing to, again, minimize the impact on the existing residents across the street. All dumpsters and trash receptacles will be kept under the podium, away from view, in a secure and organized fashion. CC&Rs will also address no storage on exterior balconies that will not be permitted. Residential condos and the CC&Rs will not allow short-term stay rentals, i.e. Airbnb. For us, we don't want to allow that because we don't want competition against the hotel. So of course, no Airbnbs. That makes a world of sense to us. Construction schedule, we discussed, we were going to do the perimeter housing first to create a visual and noise barrier, physical barrier for existing residents, minimize impact on their daily life. Garbage and delivery trucks will only be allowed during normal business hours and in compliance with city ordinances. All retail and commercial activities, i.e. outdoor music and other what you might think of late night disturbances, will be limited to normal business hours in compliance with city ordinances. Any deviation of those ordinances will require proper noticing and permits by business or operator. HOA and maintenance fees, obviously they need to be commensurate with the pro rata share of the road and other impacts to the surrounding neighborhood streets. Also, buildings will be set back an additional 10 feet to enhance the privacy and minimize visual impacts and for the adjacent neighborhood compatibility. So here what we're trying to do is even set the perimeter 2 stories even further back, so it creates even a larger gap between the residents across the street who are I think they're like 5 foot, 10 foot setback. We're looking at more of a 20-foot setback, if I'm correct. And so again, we're trying to make it seem, that corridor seem wider, so you don't feel like you have this, tall kind of, impact on the neighbors across the street. Perimeter landscaping will include tall trees to create privacy screens for all neighbors, not just the Dove Creek neighbors, but also for the promenade, the residents living on the promenade, just as much as the neighbors on Cash and Bliss don't want people seeing in their windows. The owners on the promenade side are not going to want, or they're going to want the same, opportunity to not have their privacy, impeded in any way. Next, I wanted to talk about the shading and solar access and analysis and sun path diagram. We do want to provide this. However, we don't want to do that prior to any major design revisions, because I feel like we're still in the iterative process. There's still more, the chances are there's still, more changes to come potentially. So we will do that, but obviously we want to do that once we've gone through the design a little bit further down the road in the design process. And then we think moving the hotel to the most southern corner of the project will reduce the shading and visual impact to the surrounding neighborhood. And I think that's a pretty good response to the DRC questions and items, that were up for review during the last DRC. So with that, we just want to say thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being, being patient with us and helping us through our technical challenges here. But we really appreciate it and look forward to your input and response.
Okay, thank you, Ted. Before we get to public comment, does anybody on the committee have a question for Ted before we get to the public? Emily.
I do. I have just a couple. First, I want to say I really appreciate how much time the design team obviously put into making revisions based on our feedback and the local residents' feedback. I think that it makes good sense what they did, and I hope that they know that we appreciate the effort, because it's obvious. For the design team, one question, I just want to confirm that the parking previously located at street level along El Camino Real and Santa Barbara, in order to make the courtyard larger and move the hotel up, was relocated to below the podium. Is that correct?
So, yeah, so basically what we did is we pushed the hotel closer to the street.
Mhm.
We are keeping all of the underground parking. We did lose, I think it's roughly 25 to 30 spaces. However, we were overparked by about 100 spaces. So at this time, roughly we're overparked by about 60 to 70 spaces. So we did lose some parking, but we also lost 16 residential units. So I guess if you added that in the equation, maybe it's hard to say that we're back up to the 100 spaces, but I would say we're in around the 75 spaces overparked. That's an approximation. Unfortunately, our architect, Don Love, I believe he got COVID, so he's not available today to answer that specific question. I do know it's a primary focus of ours to be overparked. Again, it's a key element to the success of the project is to have parking availability. It's paramount. It's paramount for the Dove Creek community, and it's paramount to the promenade, our promenade project.
Understood. I think specifically, I just want to clarify whether there's any parking that has remained at podium level. And
yeah, so there's no parking at podium level anymore, which means 100% of the parking is now not visible on the project.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, on one of the images submitted for the revised kind of overall architectural site plan, it shows what looks like an increased buffer between the building A commercial along Santa Barbara and the new, I think it is building E along at the corner of Bliss in Santa Barbara. It looks like there's a widened buffer there. I just wanted to make sure that was not a new proposed like access drive of any kind. Is that
I'm sorry.
correct understanding?
Oh, here we go. Oh my gosh, Kelly, that's phenomenal. Can you please show me? Unfortunately, Dawn's not here, so it's-
Certainly. I'm looking at a version of this that we're looking at here that shows between this lower left-hand residential building E, I believe, and the shifted building A there, the kind of area between in the version I'm seeing here is much larger. And I just want to confirm that you're not proposing any new access drives off of Santa Barbara or El Camino Real.
No.
And I wanted to jump in there just for transparency. We haven't run this design by our emergency services team yet. And so there is a possibility that they might want some level of emergency access to that podium level in some degree. So I don't want to say that there wouldn't be, but it would be limited to emergency access if we did need it.
Understood. Let's see here.
I think
another question for Ted and the design team. Aside from the elongation of the commercial section of that building A, have any other changes been made, or are they being proposed to the hotel elevations?
I think what happened was the hotel did elongate. So I believe the hotel count might have gone up by about 10 rooms, but we reduced the residential by 16. And so I think it's about 1 per room for parking requirement. And I believe the residential units were about 2.5 parking spaces per unit. So obviously there was a net gain in parking requirement reduction based on the reduction in residential units versus the addition of the hotel unit count.
Okay. Has the look, or is the look of the hotel being proposed to change at this point, or is it remaining primarily as we saw previously?
Yeah, we are trying to maintain the architectural style based on the need to, again, create this high quality design for the southern end of Atascadero. However, I do believe the one thing is our domes. We're looking at maybe changing the color of the domes. We're not making them more attractive. I think I sent a letter to the DRC about mission style domes in California.
Yeah.
And there was one that had a blue, it was a white with a blue dome that was very beautiful. It almost reminded you of the place in Greece. What's that called? Nope, it's on the Greek Isle. It's got the most beautiful blue
Mykonos.
Yeah, when you look it up, it's
okay.
If you saw it, it's spectacular.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're not proposing reducing any of the thick wall sections or removing any of the decorative ironwork or kind of alternate material window and door sills. It's all remaining as we discussed before, theoretically.
Yeah, no, we have to keep the quality of design up, and the space and the place in Greece I was talking about was Santorini. So if you look up Santorini, it's known for its beautiful roofs and white stucco finish. It's absolutely beautiful.
Understood. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you, Emily. Heather, did you have a question? I don't see up here right now.
I do.
Oh.
So my question is mostly, now that we've had this conversation and heard the presentation by the applicant, and thank you for your additional work, is when are we going to look at it to see if it's even compliant with the codes? So with emergency access, all of the additional questions that have come up with this new design that was submitted right at the beginning of this presentation.
So I think if you give sort of a general direction on the concept, they'll refine that concept if there's any changes that the DRC requests or any comments that they hear from the neighborhood that they want to incorporate. And then we'll basically begin our staff review of code compliance, general plan compliance, and things like that. And then as that gets further refined, we will bring that back to DRC for a public hearing.
Since this presentation was submitted right at the start of the meeting, is it possible to forward us this attachment so that we can have the most up-to-date information?
The applicant's presentation? Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'll make it a little bit easier to give you feedback from the latest version versus making modifications to the ones that we have in front of us from the last meeting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Heather. I guess we'll go to public now for any comments or questions that they may have. I see one person's hand up, Susan Gibson. We can start with her.
All right.
Sorry, this is actually Bob, Susan's partner. She's on a business phone call that just came up. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. I like the fact that the light standards on the interior parking area and a park area that it'll be facing downward so that it doesn't illuminate the sky and come over the tops of the buildings. Which would then illuminate towards all of Dove Creek. So that sounds good. Hopefully it doesn't stand up any taller than the tallest building. I guess that's the second or the third story. Also, this has come up before, traffic on the Dove Creek streets, the two streets there in question, Bliss and Cashin. And I guess there'll have to be some arrangement with regards to maintenance of the street as well. And our home backs up to the Greenbelt where the nice park area is. And at present, I am not yelling, but I am loudly voicing my concern to people that are walking on the grass versus on the walkway. The dirt pathway that's designed because it is a protected area. I think it's frogs and other creatures that it's protected. And I'd like to see what if anything, the builders are going to do with regards to people that live there to utilize the Greenbelt and the pathways, because that's ours, not theirs.
Huh, interesting. Okay.
And that's really it. Everything looked like it was amending and adjusting nicely. And thanks for the opportunity to attend and speak.
Okay, thank you, Bob. And we'll have staff respond to some of these questions after we get through.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bob. All right, looks like Brianna is next. We'll go in alphabetical order here, I suppose.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, my name is Brianna, and I'm a current resident and homeowner of Dove Creek on Cuervo Way. I use the trails every day, and in the evening and while it's dark. So I was glad to hear about the sconces, the lighting and stuff that are going to be just downwards, because that was definitely a concern of mine. I definitely liked the elimination of the third floor on the condos in concept 3. For the architectural theme, I'm not a big fan of the mission style. I feel like it's not really appropriate. It's more of a copy of like Santa Barbara and other areas with actual missions. And the missions, however, I feel like what we do have really don't support other aesthetics of Atascadero. And the missions, they they represent slavery and genocide of Native Americans. And so I feel like we shouldn't continue that type of architecture here. I feel like it's inappropriate, but there are other styles that are more aesthetically pleasing and would be more complementary with the surrounding architecture of the existing neighborhood. Combination of mixed materials such as brick, wood, and metal elements would be more pleasing and more compatible with not only the neighborhood, but the changes that are happening downtown. The proposed Dove Creek mini storage project is using some of these aesthetics, and it is, and if the project gets approved, it probably will be the best looking mini storage in town and in the county. I just would like the developers to change the aesthetic, and the mission style just doesn't fit with the current houses surrounding the project site. So there's that. And let's see, was there anything else I wanted to say? I was happy to see that the palms were removed. I am still concerned that non-native plants will dominate the landscaping. So I would like to see native species used, and I would like to know what the new design for the Central Park area will be too. But yeah, so I just want things to be compatible with our current wildlife and compatible with our neighborhood. And I think that's all I'll cover today. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Brianna. Looks like our next speaker is Demetrio, and I'm not even going to try to say your last name.
Don't try, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Long and difficult. Yeah, I just have two very quick questions. One question is, it was my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that with the current zoning, CR zoning, it says that residential units can only be over existing retail or commercial space. However, in the design, even proposed 3, the townhomes that are facing Bliss-Cushing, they do not have any retail underneath. Like, is it, am I misunderstanding? Is it, is this design compatible at all with CR zoning?
With that question, I am going to let Phil jump in, or Phil or Kelly on that one. You can answer that one right away.
Sure, thanks. Thank you, Mark. Well, in this particular instance, they are proposing a plan development master plan amendment of the plan development, so they can do what we call custom zoning. They can do ground floor residential in a commercial retail zone under this kind of scenario. And our general plan does allow some ground floor residential in commercial zones. Generally, the majority of residential units should be above commercial in our commercial zones for a mixed use project. However, they do have flexibility, again, with a plan development, with a master plan of development, and with this particular scenario as supported by our general plan.
Yeah, thank you. And the other very quick question is that with such a huge change compared to the initial environmental review, that when Dove Creek was created, will there be another environmental review impact? And related to this is also impact was mentioned about our trails. I believe that original documents for the regional environmental review was stating that maintenance of the trail system as well is supposed to be borne by people living in Dove Creek, as well as commercial property in Dove Creek.
We'll get to that one after we get through all the other questions. That first one there, I did want to get answered right away, but we'll get Phil or Kelly to answer about the EIR when we get through the rest of them. So do you have more, Demetrio?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so I'm gonna just make another announcement to all the people that are in attendance. Now is the time to put your hand up if you have something you want to say, because I don't want to be opening and closing public comment once I close it down. So giving you a couple of seconds here, not seeing anybody's hand go up. So it looks like, oh, there's one. Okay, John, you're on. Or as soon as Mariah gets you on there.
Can everyone hear?
Yes, I hear you, John. Go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. Just a quick point. I did want to start off by saying that we're encouraged that Cal Coastal has made some significant changes to the plan. As everyone can see, I think it's definitely moving in the right direction for the residents that are directly next door. So I did want to give credit where credit is due on that. I did also want to call attention to, again, I think that there are some areas where information may be, I don't know the right word to use for it, but I don't want to use manipulated. It's a little too harsh for this this setting. But I think it's page 12 on the screen share that's in front of us. But there's I don't know if you're able to pull that up. Yeah. So this view is actually from Dove Creek across the street, and that's actually pretty dang close to where my wife and I live, which we had actually asked for in the last meeting, and I appreciate that this was put together. But I did want to call attention to the fact that if you look at the hotel, this is a great example. While it looks like the hotel disappears, you can actually look just to the left behind the tree, and that dome pops out just out from behind that tree. The significance of that hotel being shifted back a little bit and moved over a little bit, if I took a step to the right, it's almost non-visible, the change. It definitely does change that viewscape, but the important thing is the scale, the mass. That was probably the biggest feedback that we've gotten from all of our neighbors and surrounding community is just the mass. And that building, if you look at the original designs, based on the grading, it exceeds 100 feet above Dove Creek, and it's not that far in. I've invited a lot of people out to come out for a visit, but if you actually stand on our sidewalk right in front of our house, where that hotel is actually not that far. I could probably throw a rock and hit it. So that 100-foot plus above our sidewalk that's not what we bought into. I just want to really reinforce that, like hiding it behind a tree doesn't really address the main issue that we've faced and that we've heard from other people. But outside of that, again, I did want to just say thanks to everyone for allowing us to participate in this process, and again, thanks to Cal Coastal for listening to us.
All right, thank you, John. I looks like we have another caller. I just see a phone number and no name. So Mariah, if you want to let that person in.
Sure. Just a reminder for people on the phone, if you want to raise your hand, you do press *9. So this is the person that's 6197.
And if you're on the phone, you might still be muted. Oh, there you go.
Hey there.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Will McKnight. I live about 300 feet from the project, and I had a couple of comments. And I had sent the details on this is by email. It didn't get out till this morning to all of you in terms of referencing the numbers. So I'll talk kind of quickly. First and foremost, the project looks great. I mean, we all have different ideas on design and domes and all that, but I'll tell you, the renderings and all that, really nice. First class job. That's great. And if this were in Santa Monica, it'd be a home run. But putting aside all the neighborhood compatibility issues for a minute, the height, the density, the other stuff, the project will never be able to generate enough income, both from ongoing rent or one-time condo sales, for it to make any sense. And, I think it's important for the city, and one of the committee members mentioned this, to really look at this. I mean, we don't have to go very far to look at projects that had a lot of fanfare, and I'm speaking of the Galaxy Colony Square project, whereby the developer promised a lot of great things, and they were well-intentioned. I don't know them, but they seemed to be well-intentioned, and they built what they could, and they got what they did, and then we're all parking in dirt lots. And so I think it really is important for the city and professionals that really know what this stuff looks like to take a look to see how this pencils out. Because, Ted mentioned affordable housing, the 30% number, a 2-bedroom condo at $456,000. Well, okay, you add that to the HOA plus the additional HOA that Cal Coastal has said this project will pay for itself, and that's more expensive than a freestanding home is here. And so my concern is that no one looks at the big picture. We start, and Cal Coastal admitted, it talked on the November 4th call about it will be a phased project. The podium won't be built all at once, and it will roll out. And my concern is 2 years from now, we'll have that residential built around the Cashin and Bliss, the 2-story residential, and we'll have a big dirt hole in the middle. And so the question is how for this to be successful. So Cal Coastal says this is a $60 million project. I don't know where they got that number from, but I think it makes sense for the city to retain some outside counsel to look at this kind of project. And I mean, not just from the standpoint of the retail and all of that, but also from the standpoint of this multi-level thing. I mean, Ted is right. Parking is important, but I will tell you, I'm not sure parking counts when you got to climb up a flight of stairs to get where you're going. So just breaking it down real quick, on the retail side, that retail has no visibility from El Camino Real or Santa Barbara, no ability to drive through the center to see what's there, or convenient parking to park in front of it. I don't know what they're doing with the American with Disabilities Act with stair access. There is an elevator spec in plans 1 and 2, but it's all the way by the hotel, which of course we built later. And so then you have the condo saleability. You know, that studio is a 900 square foot studio, according to, again, plans that are still work in progress. Again, can you sell a 900 square foot studio for $350,000? Because if you can't, what's going to happen is Galaxy. We're going to get something built, but it won't be finished, and it'll be a bunch of dirt. Same goes for the hotel. First of all, I don't believe it's a hotel, but we'll circle back around there. 112 room independent self-in hotel with limited services. Does that work? I mean, the email I sent you, you know, that is the largest independent non-flagged hotel in North County. The Spring Hill Suites, 130 rooms, Home 2 Hilton, 120, Motel 6, 118, and then the Dove Creek at the additional 112 rooms. So how does that work? Ted spoke of hotel being different. It's 500 square foot rooms. That's no different than anybody else in town. There's limited services, less than what Holiday Inn Express and whatever has. And this issue, so does that work? And I don't know. I will tell you this, that the Bella Sarah Suites is the largest non-flagged hotel in North County. They have 60 rooms, 60, half the size of this, with 12 different room layouts, not one. And I happen to know their CEO. They also own the Hampton. And the way they've been able to make that project successful is the overflow from the Hilton 800 reservations. So there's that. And then the construction cost of parking 300 cars underneath concrete. That is stuff that I would like somebody to think through that knows these numbers, that is independent of the project. With respect to the project itself, just briefly, the size of the project, I looked at it 2 different ways. The height you've heard about, but I also looked at density. And my definition of density is the total square footage of buildings built into the land size. So for example, the Vons and Rite Aid Center is 26% covered, meaning that 26% of the 14 acres of land has buildings on it. And that's about right. Adobe Plaza, where Little Caesars Taco Bell is 24%. Big Lots Center, that was the one that Ted was pointing out earlier, I think the Mission Oaks, I think they call it, that's 29.5%. La Plaza, I love that thing. That's going to be a home run. That's 49%. The Dove Creek project we're looking at today is 90.1%. So it is almost 4 times Vons Rite Aid in terms of buildings, square footage per underlying acre of land. And that's a lot of density. And I don't even, so there's that. The height comparison, as John said a minute ago, you know, La Plaza went through a lot of hoops to get the 45-foot height exemption from the curb. Now, you guys, it's actually 65 feet if you count the non-occupied tower, clock tower. But from the Dove Creek standpoint, there's, yes, I see the 77 feet, but it really is 115 feet if you're standing in Dove Creek looking at it, because of the way that you all are using the average grade. But the bottom line is, if I stand at the base of this project, the driveway to pull in underneath that parking, it is 115 feet high from where I stand. And that is just, that's a lot of height next to a 2-story home. So the hotel, and I'm going to put that in quotes, you know, the developer, current developer was also concurrently marketing this, and it's America, they can do whatever they want. and I'm going to quote this, the buyer can build a 100-room extended stay hotel that allows short-term or long-term occupancy. And so my concern is this is apartments. You know, they've asked for 100% a kitchenette in these units. The square footage of the kitchen area in the hotel room is exactly the same as the condos they're proposing. And you know, I see San Paulo Inn all over again. And I'm sure most of us know it, San Paulo Inn is the quote unquote motel that sits behind the abandoned KFC. And you know, they don't even pretend to rent that nightly. And so the question for the city is are there deed restrictions for that occupancy length? Since the developer is openly saying this can be a long-term occupancy hotel with kitchenettes in 100% of the rooms. I mean, as I understand it, Atascadero Municipal Code limits the percentage of kitchenettes to total hotel because of long-term residency. And of course, from a tax standpoint, the city of Atascadero loses bed tax if the occupancy goes over 31 days. So a couple of the last things. Ted mentioned again this issue about trash under the podium, under the parking structure. City of Atascadero has, the municipal code says that you have to have your trash enclosures within 100 feet of residential, and there has to be 25-foot vertical clearance, you know, driveway to above. And I didn't know where that came from until I went over and talked to Waste Management. Their trash truck needs 23.8 feet to lift a container. So we keep hearing how they're going to service the trash under the podium. The podium has a clearance of 15 feet. The trash truck needs 24 feet. Municipal code is 25 feet. So there's that. And my concern, of course, is that both Cashin and Bliss will become service alleys for the project. If you can't get a trash truck in there to function, and I challenge anybody to get a truck under that podium, there's no loading zones anywhere in this project. There's no place for a FedEx to pull over to the side or a small bobcat, a bobtail from Cisco Foods to service the hotel. So Cashin and Bliss, I'm worried they're going to become service alleys for the project. And this parking deck, the whole cost, yeah, I know, just enough to be dangerous. So I was given a number between $7,000 and $11,000 for that podium. Assuming there's not a 22,000 gallon pool on top, and assuming that no fire trucks will drive up there. And that's, I think, why they went with Plan 3. That's $2.1 million just for the parking deck. So, you know, the land is for sale for $850,000. They purchased it in 2018 for $600,000. So there are lots of issues. Ventilation on the underground thing, it's a big problem. The cost of the retaining wall, the engineering, what the environmental impact looks like when you cover all that dirt with concrete and where all that water is going to go, and know a 5,000 square foot basin that doubles as a dog park is not going to work with all that water. So lots of questions, not lots of answers. One last thing, the zoning, and this is where Dimitro was going, and I just kind of want to follow up on that. If you step back to where Dove Creek was approved, it was a 63-acre multi-use project. The city said 29 acres can go for homes, 28 acres has got to be open space, and 6 acres for commercial. So of the 279 homes that's permitted that Cal Coastal is looking to modify, 79 were bonus already, and that bonus extra homes were given for low income, they were given for design, they were given for density, but they were also given because the developer at the time and the city council said, look, we have this 6-acre commercial project on the corner that will generate sales tax revenue, 60,000 square feet, as Kelly pointed out when we first started, and that will help offset those costs. So the project is multi-use, but you've already multi-used it. The corner is commercial retail, period. And to Dimitro's point, the reason why the city of Atascadero limits residential only over commercial is for the sales tax revenue. And, you know, we just passed the sales tax thing. And I understand the issue with what Phil said in November 4th, when he was talking about how things have changed and how this project is sat empty. And I get that. One of the reasons it's sat empty is because they overpaid for the parcel. I mean, there's a lot of money for that land. But it's not incumbent upon the city to bail the developer out. The city needs taxable square footage for sales tax on their major thoroughfares. If the rationale is well, no one will develop unless we put a bunch of residential on it, the city, if it has zero sales tax, will go to 20% because the denominator of available square footage that's even close to being developed for sales tax revenue will go nowhere. So the city council was very clear on this. If you go back to the notes when they originally approved this project, we've already mixed use the 6 acres. It is 100% commercial retail, just like the zoning map says. Yes, it lies within the mixed use project, but I can no more put a condo on that commercial retail than I could put a Starbucks on some of that open space, because I couldn't sit there and say, hey, wait, it's in mixed use. Well, yeah, but it's zoned it. Well, no, it's in the mixed use development. We can mix it up. So that's really important from the standpoint of the fiscal responsibility. And then one last thing, this meeting and the notices, and I've made some noise about this. You know, first of all, Phil and Kelly have been super responsive to me on my dumb questions, and I certainly appreciate that. And the content of the second DRC notice was more appropriate, noting the exceptions and leaving out the swimming pool nonsense. But this meeting was noticed with 300 feet from the parcel, from that corner. And yet the developer is petitioning the city to modify plan development number 12, which would include all of Dove Creek residents. And most of my neighbors don't know about this, and would also include a 300-foot perimeter around that. So I think that that's disingenuous at best. And I know case law is evolving and there's distinction between DRC and Planning Commission and City Council, but your own notice says, if you challenge, and I'm quoting this, if you challenge the action taken on the proposed project in court, you may limit it to raising only those issues you or another person raised at public meetings. My neighbors didn't have a chance to raise that because they weren't noticed. So there's there. So to be clear, look, you know, Cal Coastal, I love their design. I love their look. I love their gut. It is a bold project. I don't think they have the wherewithal to build it. I don't think they have the wherewithal to finance it. And it's up to the city to prove me wrong. You know, their outreach, just to be clear, there were no questions permitted, no postcards, no tacky flyers in the mailboxes, and no one really showed up. So there has been no outreach. So I think in conclusion that we need a close look at this entire thing from the applicant's history. You know, how many shopping centers have they done? I couldn't find any. How many hotels have they operated? I couldn't find any. You know, this issue with me pointing out that the deck won't hold the swimming pool and the deck won't support the emergency vehicles that are designed in Plan 1 and 2. That's scary for me because I don't know these things. Yeah. And if I'm and I don't want to do that. So one last thing, and then I'll break.
Yeah,
so
if you
I
could
think
wrap it
it's
up
important.
quickly, please. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I think it's important that the city check this out, the developer, the numbers, go out to outside consultants, the environmental review, traffic, improvements of Santa Barbara and 101, and the noise and all the other things. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Will. And I just will say that as far as the structure is concerned with supporting a pool and the trucks and the vehicles and all that stuff, that's the easy part because that'll be engineered properly, and that's the least of my worries anyway. So all right, looks like we have one more caller.
The cost is different.
Pardon me?
The cost. It's the cost of engineering.
Yeah, that's another story. All right, so we have another caller.
Yeah.
Sunny Gerber. Mariah, if we can get this person on.
Yes. Sunny, you should be able to talk.
Still muted.
Sunny, you might have to unmute yourself in the bottom left-hand corner. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Sunny, you there? Sonny, we're not hearing you. We might have to move on. Any ideas, Mariah, on what's going on?
They may not actually have a microphone is my thought. They're unmuted. It might be best if you call back on a phone, Sonny, if you can still hear us.
Okay. Seeing no other hands up, I will close public comment, but if Sonny should happen to get back in via phone, I will let him speak since we're having technical difficulties with him. So with that, I'm going to close public comment. I don't see other hands up. Give Phil or Kelly a chance to respond to some of the comments that were raised, and some of the easy ones. You know, the lights, obviously there, and I'll let you elaborate a little bit more on this, Kelly or Phil, on the lights. I know we have standards for the city, the type of lights and where they shine and how bright they are and all that kind of stuff. But just for the benefit of the people that are online listening, they can maybe hear it again. And then some discussion on the traffic. I think there was a question on traffic and how that's going to affect if we're at that point in the discussion, or if this is something that's going to be evaluated and what the possible implications are of that, if this thing should get developed, as we see it now. Let's start with those two things right there.
Great, and I'll start, and Kelly should chime in as well. But in terms of lighting, our city has a very strict night sky ordinance in terms of what we can allow in a commercial project or a residential project for that matter. And when we get closer into a design, we're going to be asking for a photometric study. And what that means is, what is the foot candles of the lighting on this property? What is the light spillage outside of this property? And what is the view of the light source from areas outside the property? And we really strictly monitor all of those things as we develop a project. We don't want light leaving the site. We don't want light interrupting the night sky. So that is an easy thing to fix on a site like this. In fact, far easier on a site like this where you've got residential uses ringing the outside as compared to what's approved in this site today, which is a commercial center with a large parking lot that's required to have 24-hour pole lights in that exposed parking lot that are exposed to the residential units on Bliss and Cashin. That's what's approved today. We wouldn't be doing something like that with a project like this. Change in the land use there is very different. It's much more residential and neighborhood oriented. So I think that's definitely a detailed concern. One of many detailed concerns that we're absolutely going to have to get deep into as we get into environmental review, getting into site planning. And I think Mr. McKnight had some very detailed questions that are definitely much more intensive than what we're looking at today, which is in terms of really much bigger picture issues about the concept and the design and those sorts of things. And I think I'll let Kelly probably chime in on the rest, but we can also talk about environmental review, which obviously we have to go back through an environmental review process, and we have to answer all those questions with an initial study. And out of that, obviously we're going to have to address traffic. We're going to have to address drainage. We're going to have to address all of those things that would be addressed with any particular project. And already in this particular project, these applicants have noted that they will be maintaining Cashin and Bliss roads for this project and for the rest of the neighborhood. So that is easily something that can be incorporated into the project conditions. So I don't know that that's a concern. I think the biggest charge really for this DRC is to look at neighborhood compatibility with the design before we get into discussions about financial feasibility, occupancy, operations, and engineering, and all those things, which are automatic things that happen with a project anyway and aren't really the concerns of this DRC. Kelly, you want to add to the other question on that?
I think that was it. I know a question was brought up about the green belt, and this parcel is part of the Dove Creek development. And so, unless there's CCNRs that stipulate differently, which I don't believe that there is, new residents, anybody within the Dove Creek development would be able to utilize that green belt. And then it would be upon the HOA, you know, and the developers to negotiate any sort of maintenance agreement that might need to happen in participation for that. And I think that those were the gist of the concept level questions, unless Mark, you noted anything else that we wanted to touch on?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Well, I wanted to ask a little bit more detail, unfortunately, about the traffic. Is there any chance that this project could, you know, overburden Santa Barbara or El Camino at this location? You know, the way we, you know, the way we look at it at Del Rio, obviously much bigger project, much bigger development potential years ago. But here, I'm just curious what has been discussed at this point.
Yeah, so we actually had a conference call with the applicant's traffic engineer very early on in the process. Now, some of the project details have changed since our initial discussion, and they haven't sort of dived into a full analysis because we're still figuring out what the applicants are settling on in terms of retail space, hotel units, and residential units. But preliminary studies have shown that there's likely going to be a smaller peak hour impact than the previously approved shopping center, because that had like a larger grocery or anchor store and sort of had a peak level demand. And this sort of has a demand that's spread out over time. So at this point, we're not anticipating a huge impact at Santa Barbara and El Camino above what was already analyzed as part of the Dove Creek project and the commercial component. But we will be refining that traffic analysis, and they'll be doing a more in-depth analysis as we move forward.
That's really good to note. Yeah, I will note a comparison. When you start adding residential and hotel uses, it dramatically reduces your traffic count. If you look at one commercial restaurant, let's say, even if it's a drive-through restaurant or something like that, those can generate between 12 and 1,500 trips per day, just one 3,000 square foot, as compared to a residence, which is about 8 trips a day. And so you start calculating the numbers here just at a glance, and you realize the overall trips, even though the mass of the development is larger, the overall traffic is substantially lower than if you had an all-intensive commercial retail project, such as a large retail store with several small accessory stores. So it's a dramatic reduction in that traffic and a dramatic change in that. So we're obviously going to have to analyze that. We're going to have to rely on traffic engineers to determine what these trips would be and how they'll impact not only this neighborhood, but the Highway 101 and Santa Barbara intersection, which is something that we've studied quite intensely as a result previously of the Eagle Ranch project.
Oh, right. Okay, well, I have a few questions of my own here that I'll go ahead and run down. So, you know, I was looking at the site and I noticed that I didn't realize there was that much of an elevation change right at the street on Cashin, where that there's the berm or whatever it is, it goes up about a 45-degree angle. Is that dirt? Was that relocated dirt from the development of Dove Creek, or is that how that land was naturally done? Because did they have to dig it down to build Cashin Street, or what was the deal?
Yeah, I mean, the site was sort of gently sloping. I don't know if that's natural dirt. The Dove Cemetery was under the commercial portion of the property, and so they did have to do a lot of excavation and relocation of some of those remains as part of the project. But basically that pad is graded to be a commercial ready pad for the master plan of development that's approved today. So it does have sort of a depression basin area. And if somebody came in with, you know, the grocery store or, you know, the Starbucks or things like that, that would be built at that pad level.
Okay, and that was going to be my next question. So that pad level, it appears to me it's about at least 10 and as much as 15 feet above Cashin Street. Theoretically, if somebody could build the building right on that level where it's at right now.
Yeah, they could, under today's code, they could go 35 feet from that finished pad elevation with a commercial structure.
So the 35 feet, because it's, you know, they say average grade, obviously, but you've got like 10 feet to Cashin where it drops down and then up. So you wouldn't be going with an average, it would be at that pad level?
So our code, the way it's written today, is that it measures it from the average finish grade under the building pad site. So if the entire building sat on the pad, we would measure it from the pad and then go up 35 feet, they would be allowed.
So it'd already be up 15, or I'm guessing 15 feet roughly. Now, with that in mind, looking at the picture, and I'm glad this picture's up because I was going to have you pull this up. This view from Wixon Street shows these buildings to be built at Cashin Street level. Is that accurate? Is all that dirt planned to be removed and actually these buildings at Cashin Street level?
Yes, that is their intent, and that's how they arrived at that semi-subterranean parking, is because the site will be excavated down to the Cashin and Bliss level. So there's a little bit of elevation change, obviously, between Cashin and Bliss that they'll have to account for, but that is the intent.
Okay, so those buildings directly across the street from Dove Creek, those homes, as a two-story are proportional to the residences that are there, because they are sitting at relatively the same ground level.
Correct.
Okay, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. The comment that got brought up about short-term and long-term occupancy for the hotel, is that something that I don't know if the applicant was planning on long-term occupancy, or even what that exactly means with something like this, or is that something that the city can restrict as part of a condition of approval?
Yes, and I think there was a couple things that were brought up here that we need to actually kind of distill some of the misinformation. I think San Paulo Inn was brought up. We brought up Colony Square, and there is a couple very unique situations with those other projects that happened many, many, many years ago. Colony Square, unfortunately, broke up into multiple ownerships, and one of those owners decided not to develop many, many, many years ago. And is now an out-of-town person. So it hasn't been, that project hasn't been financially feasible. It has. And people have wanted to purchase those properties and wanted to move forward with those properties. However, that property owner won't sell. So we have an ownership issue there because we've got 3 or 4 different owners in one project. Not the same situation here. In regards to a hotel that gets converted to residential, that's not legal. The San Paulo Inn is an active code enforcement case. It is not legal to be used as a residential project for long-term residency. They are a hotel. Our city attorney is pursuing that actively right now. However, they are also paying transient occupancy tax and claiming that they're not a long-term residential project, but obviously they were built that way, unfortunately. They were built at a time when the city didn't have those kinds of regulations, and there was a little bit of a blend. But it's also a very unusual location, and that location has suffered economically in that location. But that's something that would not be allowed in this particular project. There would be a deed restriction recorded on this property that if it's a hotel, it is for stays of less than 30 days and subject to transient occupancy tax. And there would be a limit on the number of kitchens that could be installed in that hotel. They could ask for exceptions for that for the project. However, that is going to be something that's going to be scrutinized by the Planning Commission and City Council. And we're going to want to ensure that this is something that can be used for short-term stays. For example, when someone has, guests over, when people are getting back together again after COVID, they have a place to stay in your neighborhood. Hey, I'm coming over for Thanksgiving. I'm coming over for Christmas. I'm coming over for the holidays. I've got a place to stay down the street and I can walk over to it. So it's a really good integration for a neighborhood. Not something that we anticipate that's going to be a tourist attraction for people coming from out of town to come to this kind of a neighborhood. It's a different kind of a setting, although it may have a little bit of that, but far less visitation than you'd have in a large commercial retail center.
All right, thank you, Phil. Next question I have, which came up from, I think Will may have brought this up, or somebody, I'm not sure who it was, but completing a large project like this and then not completing it, or taking a certain, too long to complete it. Is there penalties for that? I think Dove Creek actually was victim of that early on, if I'm not mistaken, or at least something down there. And and it seems like we talked about it at the Planning Commission level. I don't recall, but what would happen if it partway through it either just never got completed or the next phase never happened?
So there isn't a lot of control on that kind of thing, to be honest with you. If someone decides not to finish a project, it's pretty rare that happens. Like I mentioned with Colony Square, it's a very different circumstance. That project was approved as one project. It was sold into different properties and different lots and different ownerships. we can control the way a property is subdivided and the way it's developed. With this particular situation, since they're all sharing a common parking lot and podium, and there's a common improvement, it would not be possible to develop this and not do the rest of it unless there's, you know, a significant departure away from this particular design scenario. Another thing to keep in mind when you're looking at, you know, sort of a long-term situation is this property is already the subject of that. It's already something that the community did not want to see, the city did not want to see. And we are now in the process of trying to make something happen with a part of Dove Creek that was supposed to be phase 1 of Dove Creek. This commercial property was supposed to be phase 1. It is already a project that hasn't been realized, that was supposed to be built before the residential. In fact, we had some significant project conditions to ensure that would happen. Then the applicant came back and argued that that wasn't financially feasible to do at that particular time. And it's allowed to be vacant for many, many, many years. So we're already in that kind of scenario. We want to see this realized and get out of it being a vacant, underutilized lot that is in need of consistent maintenance, that's not contributing to either the Dove Creek community itself nor the city at large.
Okay. Backing up a little bit on the elevations of the buildings. So the buildings, even the latest or even the previous, but let's go with the latest rendition that are up against El Camino and Santa Barbara. I'm not clear even on the sections in this latest staff report. We have small drawings, so it's hard to see. What is the height of these buildings from the sidewalks at El Camino and Santa Barbara?
So we think, again, this is conceptually designed and they literally just sort of scooted it over on their site plan and said, this is something that we can likely work on and develop if the DRC likes this concept. So we've kind of estimated based on the size, the height of building A previously, that it's about 77 feet would be from the podium level, which is roughly the level of El Camino and Santa Barbara. It may be slightly depressed right at the intersection because those streets do have some elevation change as they move away from the intersection.
Now, Kelly, when you say that height, you're talking about the top of the dome, the very peak of the dome? Or?
I don't believe that was to the top of the dome. I believe that was to the top of the roof line of that, that penthouse 4th floor.
Okay, so the 4th floor on top of the 3-story hotel. And typically each story is about 12 to 14 feet. That doesn't, something seems off there. It doesn't seem right, because if you've got, even if I had 15 foot a story, 30, 45, 55 feet, it doesn't, something's not.
Yeah, I think that they have a larger commercial, and then that top floor, just because of the roof line, in order to be architecturally compatible. You know, when you do a gable roof, the pitch, you know, lifts it up, you know, another, you know, 8 feet or so.
But I think before we really settle on, I mean, because a lot of our 3 and 4 story hotels that we have are, for example, what's the height of the Hilton Home to Suites, which is a 4-story building? That's not.
I believe it's close, although that one again does not have a roof. It has a flat roof, and so it does not. It's not trying to accommodate sort of that aesthetic feature.
Before we confirm that height, I think we need to go back with the architect and the development team to really see what these are. It doesn't seem, that doesn't seem quite accurate. So I think being a concept, we need to look at the overall picture, and I think go back to the applicant to determine exactly what those heights are. It seems like that might be excessive.
Yeah, I was concerned about that too, but a couple of my concerns are obviously, I mean, looking at this, what you have on the screen here. So if this was a completely flat side all the way across Dove Creek, just keeping it simple, the height limitation is 35 feet?
Today it is, yes. Our new housing element, and the state has asked for us to increase that height. And so that will likely be one of our first changes that we make to our zoning code. We don't know where that's going to end up. But the state has told us that 35 feet in multifamily and mixed use is inappropriately low.
Okay, and you know, in the staff report, it mentions the incentives for, you know, 3 incentives, concession for 30% and so on and so forth. And concessions can include height increase. And I'm wondering if this has been discussed in terms of the height increase, and how do you justify how much height increase is going to be appropriate?
Yeah, so the state is basically asking us, you know, what is the height that your emergency services can service, and that would be an appropriate height limit for your multifamily and mixed-use commercial zones.
Okay, I would suspect that 77 feet is too tall. I know we have a ladder truck, but I don't know.
Yeah, so the ladder truck is concerned with getting to that 4th floor, the standing level of the 4th floor, I guess, the occupied level. And so that, you know, so if it's sort of 68 feet from that really base podium level up to the tippy top of that roof, not including the architectural dome, you know, then we're looking at, you know, 50 feet or slightly below to the level that they need to access. And that they have said that is within their ability to access with the ladder truck.
Oh, okay, interesting. Okay, that, again, the height is still a concern of mine, especially when we're looking at, you know, I mean, I know our code's 35, the state says we should go higher. It seems a little bit ambiguous now as to how high we can or should go. 77 doubles it more. So I just don't know how we come to a conclusion on what's appropriate. I just wanted just a comment or an observation. I don't know if Will's still listening or if he's online, but his email was extremely detailed, had a lot of information. I appreciate that. It was actually fun to read because he put a lot of stuff in there. One of the things he brought up was the density, and the density of this project being 90% as compared to La Plaza and other ones around town. And I will say, even though it's a 90% density, it provides way more parking than any other. So I got to give him kudos to that, because that's usually one of my biggest problems is the parking issue and reduction in parking. And when you have a 40% lot coverage and not enough parking, that's even more of a problem. But that's just an observation. I thought that was interesting of him to point all that stuff out. But I like what they've done with the revisions. They did scale it back a little bit. I'm just mainly concerned about the height. I don't want to set a precedence. I wouldn't want to say that, you know, I don't know. I just don't know how we set that target height as something that's going to be used again for other projects. And I don't want to create an issue down the road for other projects in other neighborhoods and whatnot. So I'm not sure. Well, let's back up here. Well, actually, before I go any further, does Emily or Heather have any questions? Because we're going to, since I brought this back to the committee for this, we can ask more questions of the applicant or staff. Emily, go ahead. I think you had your hand up first.
Kind of piggybacking on some of what you have asked, and then also some of what Phil mentioned earlier. So for staff, Phil, you mentioned that previously this project, specifically the commercial portion of this project, had conditions that were not adhered to for whatever reason that have, you know, subsequently left it undeveloped. What were those conditions? How were they applied, and how can we avoid the same thing in the future? Namely, are there ways that we could condition final or occupancy of the residential units to be, you know, dependent upon application for, you know, additional building permits within a certain time frame, such that we can at least try to encourage forward progress?
What we try and do is design conditions and mitigations that are actually really feasible. That's the most important thing. And with a project like this, we will likely be talking with our city legal team to determine the best approach in designing a condition that ensures we get the project that the community expects. And there's a number of ways that we can do that through the conditions and mitigation measures and deed restrictions. I'm unsure as to why the existing conditions from many years ago, from 15 years back or more, were not legally enforceable and did not work. It's perhaps because there's been several different ownerships, and then, the applicant, went to the city council and asked for changes to those conditions and for exceptions and to be able to move forward. And the city council granted that at one time. So that's really what happened here. It wasn't that they ignored the conditions. They basically went in and changed those conditions with the city council and were able to do things differently over time. And that was allowed to happen. So, and that's something that everyone was a part of. So that's also a possibility of what can happen when you have different decision makers over time. But there's definitely certainly ways that we can craft conditions that are legally enforceable to ensure we have the product we want and the community has a product that they expect.
Okay. A follow-up to kind of next steps and questions about some of the studies we'd like to see. Will a solar access analysis be, or can it be a requirement of the CEQA analysis, or even, be required ahead of that with initial application?
That has to be a CEQA and can be done before that as well.
Okay.
We require a solar and shadow study to be done so that we're not blocking solar access onto adjacent properties.
Yeah.
And so that that's just, it's one of the basic CEQA things that we'll have to cover. But also with the initial application, we'll have to demonstrate shadow.
Okay. Because I'm, again, running some just really basic geometry. I'm still concerned about the height for that reason. As Mark mentioned, he's concerned for the height. I am as well, both for massing, but also because of my concern for solar access. I'm just still seeing an issue with that. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, Heather, you're up.
So I guess my recommendations as we look at the next steps are, one is to make sure that the code compliance is evaluated prior to the next DRC hearing. I think that'd be very helpful so we can look at numbers in a more timely fashion that that will stay the same, so that we're not looking at something that may or may not change. It helps in giving direction a little bit more to the applicant as well as the citizens of Dove Creek, so that they have an idea of what the final numbers are going to look like. I think once we determine that, then we'll be able to look at a final design. I know it's hard, and you're looking for feedback from us, but at this point, I don't feel like we have all of the information laid out cohesively to give any more feedback. This is, I think, just more of a nice opportunity to hear what the community is doing, hear what the applicant's doing, and then wait for the next hearing to be able to go over all the final numbers and ask for those additional things that we're going to look for. Because I think we're asking them ahead of time if there's an adjustment on height, which obviously there needs to be if the fire truck can't reach it, then we're having to relook at an entire layout again. So those are my 2 cents on this. But I do appreciate everybody's hard work. I know this is the hard part of getting a project, just getting the fundamentals worked out. And I look forward to seeing a concept that works and integrates with our community. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Heather.
Mark, I just wanted to interrupt real quick.
Yes.
We were finally able to patch Sunny through. I think he's at the 461-5000 number, Mariah.
Oh.
So if we could just allow him an opportunity to speak. I know we said we would do that if we could.
Yeah, we'll let Sunny speak now. I see Ted has his hand up, but he's going to have to wait until we get through the committee members here, then we'll let him in. So Mariah, if you can get Sunny in, then that would be great.
All right, let's see. Are you there, Sunny?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, finally. Okay, so I've sent some emails with my concerns. My family and I are homeowners. We live in Dove Creek. We live right on Shurin Court. So my backyard and my second story, which is my master bedroom, will be facing this monstrosity. I have serious concerns, which I have voiced, about the traffic control plan, because use and access is going to be made by Cashin and Bliss. I'm not sure if the design review committee has actually even taken the time to drive down those two roads to see how narrow they are and try to figure out on their own how this design and this building and hotel and so forth is going to be able to accommodate that, as well as accommodate the street parking for the Dove Creek residents. I know that there was supposedly a traffic control plan, but the information that I received was that this plan that was done in the past was for the previous commercial design that this developer had done a meeting with residents in the past. It was nothing to this size. It was for something a lot smaller. And now with them trying to eliminate some of the parking spaces and putting more underground, I think that's going to add to the more traffic on Cashin and Bliss and cause further issues. I already have to park my vehicle out on the street, and my wife parks her vehicle inside of our garage. We have a common driveway, so we can't park our vehicles on the driveway. So I feel that this is a serious concern, and I voiced it in emails, and I want to know further. I think I missed about 30 minutes of the meeting trying to get connected to be able to speak during the public comment. So I would like some further explanation on their plans, as well as maintenance and fees that we pay out of our HOA dues, as well as widening or prohibiting access from non-residents through those two streets. So if that question could be addressed, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Sonny. Let's see, Kelly or Phil, you want to take the street parking and possible widening of the street? I don't know if that's something we can talk about.
Yeah, we can touch on it sort of conceptually. We haven't done a full review, but I did touch base with the city engineer because I don't know if it was you, Sonny, or somebody else who brought up the narrowness of the street previously. He has looked at it. It is one of our wider streets, and so it would be able to accommodate the traffic scenario of a commercial center. It was designed that way before. So it's not so much narrowness that we'll look at with the traffic report, although if there's any suggestions from the traffic engineer on changes to the street, we'll take those into account. But they'll mostly be looking at sort of trip numbers and how many cars are accessing the street and making sure that there's no queuing issues on the residential streets, on the streets lining this project, or on El Camino Real and Santa Barbara Road. And then again, maintenance.
So there is going to be, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Repeat your question, Sonny.
I just said, so there is possibly a new plan that's going to be done to address possibly widening that street, because there's no way that that street's wide enough for that such size of complex. You cannot drive two vehicles and park two vehicles on both sides of the street. And that happens daily with the street parking. If everybody's home after 5 o'clock, that street is completely packed and it's barely enough to fit one vehicle down the middle of the street.
Yeah, so
I absolutely disagree with that plan.
So our city engineer will be taking a look at that, as well as any traffic report that's done. Traffic reports look at sort of queuing, how many trips are coming to a place, as well as the design of the streets and the entrances and things like that. So we'll be looking at that in further detail. And then in terms of the maintenance of the street, the project originally was specifically designed not to have the commercial portion pay into maintenance as an incentive to develop that site. But certainly the current developer and applicant has suggested that they are open to participating in that maintenance. And so it will be a matter of the HOA coming to the table with the developer and negotiating some sort of maintenance agreement for those streets, and then potentially some of the trail system as well.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Sonny. Thank you so much.
Sonny, thanks for being patient with us.
Yeah, I have a question.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm going to back up on a question here because I missed this one in my list here that was brought up by Will. The trash, and this is for Kelly or Phil. The trash trucks going in that underground parking. That was a really good question. Is how are these trucks going to handle dumpsters or trash pickup in that scenario?
Yeah, that was a really great question. We usually on projects like this or projects where trash collection looks difficult, we usually do have the applicants do some coordination and approval of the plans through waste management. So that is generally part of our staff review process, as we will get waste management involved on a trash pickup and location plan. So we'll be able to bring those details back at a later date. But they are details that we do look at as part of our compliance review.
This is one of the ones that, you know, it may not seem to some people, but I see it as an extremely important one, because you can't fix this after the project is partially built or approved, because trash has to be someplace. You can't just go, oops, well, we'll do it a different way. It's like having the right number of parking and all of a sudden saying, well, we can't just add a parking spot unless you tear part of a building down. So I hope that this gets rectified, you know, pretty quickly in the design, because yeah, a big truck going underneath that, it seems like a big issue. Going to be very complicated. Dwayne, I almost forgot about you. Do you have any questions? You snuck in quietly.
I'm still here. I've been listening. So I remember when we looked at this a while ago, I believe it was for Tractor Supply.
Yeah.
So I don't recall, and so I just would want to throw it out. What was the parking access going to be from there? Was it it wasn't coming off of the side streets, is that correct?
So the access has always been there as part of the master plan and development. There are 3 driveways approved, 2 from Cashin and 1 from Bliss. And then there is an access restriction off of Santa Barbara and El Camino because of just the traffic mechanics of the intersection in those roads. So they are, this parcel is not allowed to take access off of Santa Barbara Road and El Camino, and they are limited to those 3 driveway access points in the master plan. And then this project is proposing to only use 2 of those.
Okay, so that access issue will be there no matter what we're dealing with.
Correct.
Then just a sort of a general, I hear a lot of concerns and stuff. So when it comes down to like any project, what is the city's purview concerning the economic viability of the project?
That is typically left to the applicant team. So if someone comes in with a really, really bad idea to the city, and we look at that and go, oh my gosh, this is awful. That's never going to be successful. We can tell them that all day long, but as long as their project is consistent with the general plan, consistent with the zoning regulations, or you know, if they get a master plan of development or a plan development like this and the city council approves it, that's not a consideration. It's not a consideration under CEQA. It's not a consideration under city policy, but most applicants don't pursue a project that's not going to be financially successful. They do their market analysis. We do get involved in that because we want to ensure success in our community. But you know, it's not really a decision-making criteria, but it could weigh into the decision if there are other compelling issues with the project and the project's generally a bad idea from an economic standpoint. Then obviously that's going to weigh down as one of the decision-making factors on a discretionary project. It's not really a factor that is of concern to the DRC. I think the factors that are of concern to the DRC are certainly neighborhood compatibility, design, lighting, and all of the things, the detailed things about how this fits in with not only Dove Creek, but how it fits in with that entire southern corridor of the city. Because this is a project that was, when it was born, when it was a commercial project born, the site was intended to serve the southern end of Atascadero, which is Garden Farms and areas outside the city and Dove Creek itself. It was intended to be that anchor so that people weren't driving and adding to more traffic on our system on Highway 101 and El Camino Real, so that they have a place they can walk to get that quart of milk or to have their hair done or to be able to lounge in an outdoor area and enjoy that kind of a setting. So it's badly needed. It comes back to the reason that also that we really like to see these projects happen first, because once you get into a residential neighborhood and you live there for a certain amount of years, change is painful. And that's what we're seeing today with all these comments. Oh my gosh, something's changing here. We wouldn't be dealing with this had we built this first, but here we are. Anyway, I'm gonna say that, just be frank about it. That's really the issue. You know, it's hard for people to realize that this was a commercial project that was supposed to happen before the folks arrived. So.
Okay, it's funny because Phil, you went to compatibility, and that's where I'm going next. And so I've heard a number of comments saying that you know, there's a certain design of the Dove Creek, and this is like they feel it doesn't fit at all. So, you know, is compatibility predicated upon things looking the same, or, you know, because I don't know if that's what we're required to do. I have to admit that to some degree, some parts of this project still don't resonate well with me, but it could be just that the renderings are not doing it justice. One other wild thought is, so if you're the neighbor and you don't want to look at a building that's different across the street, perhaps there's a possibility of redesigning the units along the residential streets to basically fit into this new definition of compatibility, which is it has to look the same.
And
I think there's a question in there somewhere.
Yeah, it doesn't have to look the same. So I think that doesn't mean compatibility. Compatibility is really complementary. You know, a sphere is complementary to a cube. And that's the reality. It's how does this fit with the overall scope? And I think you did hear some great comments from the community. Hey, they don't prefer mission style. They prefer, and I think I heard some comments early on about something that does incorporate something that is more Atascadero, which is brick and wood and metal and maybe craftsman style and colony style, like our colony homes, and things that evoke Atascadero when people think of Atascadero. Those are the things that generally we look at in terms of neighborhood compatibility. Does it have to be the same design as the houses in Dove Creek? No, it does not, but it should be compatible with the overall character of our area and feel like it's not completely out of place, but it can fit and be part of the community, whether the design is different or whether the design is the same. And those are the things, and that's challenging in a community where we don't have very specific design guidelines. So it gives us a lot more discretion and subjectivity for that detail. So we really have to listen to the community, look at these plans and look at the situation. I know the applicant team has toured a tremendous amount of other properties throughout the state of California to get ideas to bring this kind of concept together. So they've done a lot of homework, and this is the design that they believe in. So it's what they're asking for. So that's part of the consideration as well.
Okay. One more, just, you know, I'm looking at our 3 items that we're supposed to be considering here, you know, building height and scale, which I think the height is somewhat of an issue still. I think the massing maybe along El Camino Real, I don't know if that's a big problem, is, you know, because it's facing away from everything. Architectural theme and detailing, we just talked about that. And then overall site design concept. The vision they laid out with a central plaza that could have, like, you know, perhaps like he said, like a micro brew or wine tasting and stuff where people might go, strikes me like something, you know, there are places now where people gather because there's a lot of access to different things. That probably would be a very favorable concept even for the neighborhood, because people would have something to do. But also, I know that when we had a previous visit to the storage unit thing, one of the things that came up was that that particular intersection is designated as the gateway to the city. So then my question is, does this vision offered like fit that? Is that, and I'm not saying one way or another, I think that's a question we need to look at if that was a criteria that we had to consider with the other project.
This is absolutely a gateway. It is the edge of the city limits. Santa Barbara Road divides the city to the county. And this is what a lot of folks coming into the community will see as a gateway. And I think that's why we were very concerned about having a storage facility or an industrial type land use that, you know, is right in a residential neighborhood surrounded by parks and surrounded by churches and views. But it's a gateway. And I think there's a commercial project consideration for a gateway that should evoke, hey, you're entering the city limits, you're entering an urban zone, you're changing from rural outside of the city to an urbanized city, and it's a gateway, and here's what we expect to see here. And so what that is purely discretion. There's not a definition of what should be at a gateway other than the fact that it should be something that's quality and attractive and is, you know, consistent with the zoning that the city anticipates for that area. So that is a consideration, absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, actually earlier in this presentation, I was thinking exactly that. You know, I'm thinking about the scale, and that's why I asked about how tall the buildings are on El Camino and Santa Barbara at those locations. And I thought, you know, driving in from Santa Barbara, I mean, on the Santa Barbara Road, or coming north on El Camino, with these buildings at this scale, I think has a positive impact. It would get your attention. I think it would look great. And I can understand the concern that the neighbors have from the other side, because then now you have these buildings sort of towering over their houses. I don't know that it's towering quite as much as being voiced. I'm looking at Google Earth right here, and I can see that the hotel building is about 400 feet away from the residences that are away. So it's a distance away. It's not like it's right on top of them. But there is, you know, you're looking at it from both sides, literally both sides, and they have a different feel. One, I think, is somewhat majestic, and it's got the you know, your gateway that kind of gives you a positive look into Atascadero. And then you have the residents that have to look at it every day, and how do you find that balance? So, but we'll get back to these three things here for our committee to weigh in on when we wrap this up. Ted's had his hand up. I'm going to let Ted chime in again, since he is the applicant on this, and see what he wanted to respond to. So, Mariah, can we get Ted in?
Yes. There we go.
Hello, am I on? Am I live?
Yeah, you're on, Ted.
All right. Wow, what a great discussion. There's a lot of topics covered. I'm glad to see that, you know, everybody are really engaged, and being engaged means, you know, shows a level of care for the site, and you know, we think there should be. Obviously, it's the gateway. On the gateway, we've got to have something that is going to be special. It's going to be high quality, and so I can understand everybody being very interested in making sure that this gateway to the city is special and is nice. What I wanted to do is touch briefly on the height. We're way off on the height, by the way. The height that we're talking about, when you're saying 70, 75 feet, that's to the tower. The actual building itself is 4 stories. It's closer to 50 feet. I know when Don designed it, it was so that the existing ladder truck could reach the 4th story. So we are in compliance with the ladder truck. We're not over towering. We're within 50 feet. I believe California code is going to mandate, I think, minimum height of 50 feet. I think we're going to see that here in the next maybe 4 months, 3 to 4 months, starting next year. Kelly and Phil, I'm sure you guys are on the in there. When it comes to trash height, Mark and Will, great points. We will absolutely make sure that the trash, you know, the way the trash is managed and handled on the site is key to the success of the site, especially for when we go to sell the site, when we go to lease out the spaces. The trash program has to work. So of course, we're going to make sure that it complies with both city and waste management requirements. That's definitely taken into consideration. Again, this is very preliminary. We will have a wonderful plan for how we manage the trash. Going back to traffic, to Sunny, thanks so much for bringing and raising your concerns. I want to tell you the good news is the existing entitled plan and the streets that were engineered and developed and built right now are capable of handling a higher peak demand, including the access in and out of the site, than what we're proposing. Our traffic count when it comes to peak traffic, and that's where you start getting the bottlenecks and the issues, is a lot less than what the original entitled approved plan was and what the streets are designed and engineered and capable of handling. Hopefully that gives you some solace. I hope it does. Going back to design and compatibility, we think that the project, because it is such a high caliber design, what you don't want is a design that takes away or lowers the value of all the existing area of Southern Atascadero. We think that compatibility means it will enhance the existing area based on the quality that the design provides. And let's talk briefly about economics, because Will touched on that. I want to make sure Will understands it. The more dense you make a project, the more economically viable it becomes. If we could put 10 stories or 20 stories on this thing, our cost of land, our cost of everything goes way down. Yeah, the project cost goes up, but the actual cost per unit goes down. I can tell you that our cost per unit is significantly under the moderate pricing limits that we described earlier in the presentation. Please go back and look at it, or you can go to the county website, look at affordable housing standards, look at moderate, and you'll see what those price points are. They're very compatible to what the resale existing values are of the surrounding Dove Creek neighborhood, by the way. And the other thing I want to point out one more time is in this southern end of town, it's very eclectic. We have A-frames, geodesic domes, mobile homes, high density apartments. And now storage, it sounds like. So, what we're doing is adding to the overall value of Southern End, and we're actually giving a monument, a beautiful monument with beautiful towers that I believe anybody entering into Atascadero can say, wow, they can be proud of. Otherwise, I can tell you, if we lose one story on a commercial hotel, the hotel doesn't become economically viable anymore. It won't work. So if we get rid of the hotel, then the whole thing starts falling apart. We might as well just go to affordable housing, which we love. We believe there's a need for affordable housing in the county and in Atascadero. We're trying to do something very special because we know this is the monument. But hey, you know what? Affordable housing is going to be, half the cost, less than half the cost, and it still generates the same amount of income. So we're happy to go either way. We're trying to do something special, but just want to make sure everyone's aware that, the economics on this are predicated upon the density. If we lose density, if we lose height, we got to pay for underground parking. Will's right. That underground parking is not cheap. The only way to get it is to get the density that we're proposing today. If that doesn't work, then this particular design doesn't work. We'd like to know that now, so I don't spend another 60 grand like we've already spent on this initial design concept development. I'd like to get in. I'd rather go in the other direction and go to affordable housing right now and save everybody time and save everybody money. Thanks so much for your time.
All right. Thank you, Ted. And because we obviously have a lot of stuff to talk about here, we've talked about a lot of different things. I see another hand up. So what I'm going to do, which is out of the ordinary here, is I'm going to open public comment back up, but I will say to the people that want to speak, because we are late in this meeting, I'm going to limit to 3 minutes, which is standard. But we didn't do that early on. But if any other speakers want to chime in, you can put your hand up. I see John Tucker has his hand up, and I will limit him to 3 minutes. And after that, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the committee for our final thoughts on the project. So, Mariah, if we can get John back in here, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mark. And I talk fast, so 3 minutes shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
I just wanted to get a quick point in there because, after hearing everyone speak, something that keeps coming up is, like Phil had said, change is painful, I think is the quote. And this is why we do commercial first. And then you had mentioned, Mark, that this being a gateway, that you're going, quote, from rural to urbanized as you're entering into Atascadero from outside of the city's border. It just, to me, it's a little bit frustrating because, again, as a new homeowner, I bought my home, my first home, saved 18 years for it 2 years ago here in Dove Creek. I bought in a rural community. And in a city that actually touts, if I can quote the Design Review Committee's charge, which is maintaining the rural character and identity of Atascadero. This is a rural community. I moved here for that reason, and I went through extensive effort in vetting out the properties that I was evaluating, and landed on this house because I at least thought that I knew what was going to happen across the street from me. This is literally across the street from where I live. In that it was described as light retail from everyone that I'd spoken to, including both realtors. I looked at the zoning, I looked at the original plan development, I looked at all of the plans, I looked at everything that was previously evaluated, including the Tractor Supply. Tractor Supply, what's shocking to me is that the Tractor Supply project, I would argue, went further in support of maintaining compatibility, and that they were sensitive to building height on the entire sum of the property. Well, this is the original developer that was developing that property. They had a firm understanding of what this 60,000 feet of retail space in Dove Creek, not next to Dove Creek, but in Dove Creek meant, and how that supported Dove Creek. So to me, it's shocking that we're looking at potentially twice the building height that was originally allowed, or that's allowed in general in Atascadero. We're looking at making concessions on so many things to make, like Ted just said, to make this viable. That's not my responsibility as a homeowner. And I don't believe that that's the city's responsibility in these meetings, is to find a way to change plans, to change zoning, to convince neighbors, however we have to do that, because there's a lot of misinformation. And I think this meeting has brought a lot of that to light when it comes to building heights and that kind of stuff, and hiding things behind trees, literally, which is crazy to me. But there's a lot of this that I just don't know why we are going through that effort of trying to make this a viable property, rather than waiting for someone to come in with a plan that actually works for everyone. That's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So, okay, so I don't see anybody else's hand up, so now I'm going to close public comment again for now, for good, for today. Bring it back to the committee for discussion of these three items. Dwayne pretty much weighed in on at least this building height and scale, I believe, but I'm going to reserve him for last since he spoke a little bit, and start with Emily. Emily, do you want to chime in on these three items that we have to discuss?
Yes. I'll say in terms of height, scale, and massing, I think that they're working in the right direction. I'd like to see the, uses that are less, I think, directly compatible with the surrounding residential moved further away from the residential. So I think that's a good move. I'd like to see more detailed information on height as it relates to the adjacent streets, all of the above, in order to provide a little bit more light on all of the questions about, height, scale, and massing. I'd really like to see an updated site section for this new layout. If in fact the buildings in the hotel and commercial section are closer to 50 feet in height, plus or minus the 15 feet of grade change from, the Cashin Street. That's better than what I thought it was, and maybe I have less concern for some of the things like solar access, but I still think we need more information in order to be able to review that on this level. And I think that, that's within, schematic design level of detail. I'd also still like to see some additional concession on the architectural theme and detailing. I think they've got a lot of really beautiful things happening here. I just still don't see it being totally Atascadero appropriate. Certainly not as we're discussing it as being a kind of monument at the gateway to town. As far as the overall site design concept, I think, again, it's moving in the right direction. You know, if we're going to have residential on this lot, I'd like it to be adjacent to and opposite of the surrounding residential, and I'd like the commercial and any hotel uses be up against Santa Barbara and El Camino. So I don't know. I'd like a little bit more detail, but I do think it's moving in the right direction.
Okay. Thank you. Did I lose Heather? Where's Heather at? Did we lose Heather? Oh, I think we lost Heather. Okay, Dwayne, do you want to continue on with? I don't know if you had more to add to these three items. We lost Heather. Okay.
Okay, there I am. I'm just unmuted here. So I'm glad to hear that the actual height is 50 feet, and that's essentially, I'm looking here. So that's running up against El Camino and Santa Barbara. Is that correct? Where that height is. So that's a fair distance away. I kind of feel like the concept, the third concept design, bringing those homes that are along the neighborhood streets down to just 2 stories really brings them into I mean, that would, if they live somewhere on the internal area, that's what they would be facing, because those are all 2-story homes. Am I correct?
I believe so.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you'd be looking at your neighborhood view is essentially the same thing that it would have been if that vacant lot wasn't there before and it had been built out as the neighborhood. So then we have an entire interior courtyard, which is, you know, I think an asset to everybody. I think, yeah, and as far as like saying that the design aspect of it, I guess my question that I can't answer for myself anyway is, I can look at it and say there's something about it that I feel is looking, I don't know, too stark or something, and yet I like the mission look. So I don't know if anybody can, it'd be probably helpful to the people if we could pinpoint what it is. I know Roberta just didn't like those round turrets. And I think they still kind of probably are one of the aspects that kind of get to people. Not that I think they should be square either. So I'm not sure about that one. And I actually think that if the presentation aspect of it, which would be the intersection of Santa Barbara and El Camino of the hotel, is done right, landscaped outside in a way that really makes something that catches your eye and you go, well, that's really cool. That would be a great entry to the city. I think it has the potential for that, especially if inside there are things that people also, they learn about, because everybody uses their phones now to find out where everything is. It could be, I think it could work out pretty well. So just in the direction we're going anyway.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. Heather, welcome back. We lost you there for a minute or two.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you want to weigh in on these 3 items, the review items?
Sorry, computer crashed. I didn't like Zoom all at the same time, so I gotta see how well my cell phone works. The design, I like the reduced scale. I like the shorter height on it. I do like all of the commercial being pushed back to the corner of Santa Barbara and El Camino. I think that's going to give the residents there a little bit more break from the commercial side of it. I think there's still a lot of design still to be worked out. I think there's a lot of unknowns that need to be reevaluated with this 4th concept that we just briefly saw today by the presentation. I think as long as staff is working and with the applicant and the applicant is listening to those in the community, I think we're going to have a viable project at the end. So I do appreciate everybody's timely investment into this. And in the end, I think it's going to be a good project. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Heather. All right, and I'll weigh in, and I'm going to start from the bottom line first and move my way up. On the overall site design and concept, I like it. I think it's got a lot of potential. I like the podium level for potential for a park and whatever's going to go on up there now, a pool and whatnot. The residential units this close to retail, restaurants, small grocery store, whatever it might be, I think is great to be able to just walk to something like that for these residences in this development, as well as anybody else in Dove Creek or whatever walking distances around. And there's plenty of houses around for something like that. The underground parking, I think, is going to be a unique and going to be a good thing year round, whether you're going to be in the sun or in the rain. But to have your covered parking when you don't have a garage, I think is going to be a plus. So I like I like the concept. I like the way the buildings are pushed up against El Camino and Santa Barbara. Like Dwayne said, and like I had mentioned earlier, this, you're going to see this as you come in off of Santa Barbara or El Camino if you're coming from the south. And if it's done right, it's going to be eye-catching, and it's going to be the first thing you see coming into town. And I think it's got potential to be that gateway item that gets your attention in a good way. The building height and scale and massing, obviously something we still need to deal with a little bit. The height, I'm glad to hear that 50 foot is much more palatable than 77 feet. If that's to the top of the dome, maybe we can figure out a way to lower that scale. Clearly the fire department has to weigh in on certain parts of that as well. And on the dome design, somebody pointed out a couple of weeks ago, yes, our city hall has a dome too. They look different. It looks different. I'm not sure what the difference is exactly. I'm trying to look at a picture and see exactly why it is that I don't particularly care for the domes on these buildings versus the Tascadero City Hall, but there is a difference. That's just a personal thing. So that's, it's not a big deal. It's just a design thing, but it doesn't really seem to fit for whatever reason in Tascadero, that particular dome style. But that's something that we can work on. I'm sure it can be tweaked. You've scaled the project back significantly. I felt you lowered a couple of floors, a couple of buildings a floor, and moved it back. And I think that helps with the scale and the massing. So I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. I think the building overall height, even if it's just at Santa Barbara and El Camino side, is going to be important. And of course, the solar sun thing that you guys were talking about is going to be helpful to maybe help a lot of people understand what kind of an effect this is going to have. So I think we're moving in the right direction. Phil, what is it that, you've heard us weigh in on it. Is there more information you need from us to move forward with this so it can go to Planning Commission, or is it going to come back to us again before Planning Commission, or what's the deal?
This will come back to the DRC. The goal is, and the question is, have we given the applicant enough information to make a more complete design submittal, do some more analysis, and come back with one design scheme that they've settled on, that they feel that they've addressed your comments, and that they come back to DRC with that design, and then the project continues on to the review process, and we continue to hear from the community and the neighborhood on all of the issues. We've heard a lot of the comments today from the community, so those need to be taken into account in addition to DRC comments, and the applicants heard a lot of those. Kelly, do you have any comments? Do we have enough to be able to give the applicant team definitive direction in terms of them completing a single design?
I think we have good direction. I think where the applicant is going to feel a little bit more uneasy is, on the architecture and on the mission style. I've kind of heard, maybe it's not so Tascadero, but maybe it's okay. And so we'll work with the applicant unless you have any specific direction to give them on that. On some changes, I know the mission design theme, while not matching of the Dove Creek neighborhood is generally a good style for sort of a taller building and where there's sort of some layering going on. Craftsman is generally for lower buildings, although obviously there's the Ahwahnee and Yosemite, which is a good example of that, but also, you know, is vastly sort of overdone with the eye candy, and I'm not sure if that's feasible. And so I'm not sure how we would bring, you know, Craftsman, too many Craftsman components into, you know, this 4-story type concept without it becoming sort of too much. So I don't know if there's any direction you want to give on sort of the mission style architecture or things like that, but I'm sure the applicant would appreciate any specifics that you could give them.
Yeah, my personal feelings, I think it's a beautiful building. I mean, I can, as an architect, I can critique it at a different level, and it's not fair because that's not really the point. Is it compatible with the area? Well, it was brought up that there's a lot of different other types of architecture at this end of town as well as the other end of town. Personally, you know, if this is, you know, as a gateway, I would have liked to see Home 2 Suites maybe be something a little bit different. There was no reason for me to object to that design as a planning commissioner. But with the central theme of Atascadero being our city hall and how La Plaza is being done, and you got Carlton, to me, those are beautiful buildings, and to be able to complement that at our gateways would have been a really nice concept. But I'm not gonna, you know, I don't object to this architectural theme personally. Maybe some certain detailing, but that's, again, that's, you know, it's just my personal opinion. So you know, whatever tweaks that they can make that they think they can make it better is really all that I can add to it, unless the other committee members would like to weigh in a little bit more on the detailing and the theme. The one thing I wanted to add before I turn this over to the other committee members was the height increase justification. We had talked about that a little bit, and that, you know, based on the concessions that can include for, you know, the incentives and whatnot, the height increases. How do we, because I asked that question, I know you didn't give me an answer, maybe you don't have one, but how does somebody come to a conclusion on what is an appropriate height increase if we're just kind of making it up? Where do we go?
So I think if we're talking about a state density bonus concession, we don't get to choose a number. So as long as it's within the capabilities of our emergency services, it can be what it can be. In fact, for 100% affordable project, I think the state mandates that we have at least a 50-foot high threshold that we allow. And I know this won't be 100% affordable, but the state is so supportive of sort of housing and mixed use developments and density that I'm not sure that we could put a number on it if it's through the route of the state density bonus concession. If they're just asking for an exception to be approved through the use permit process, not associated with a state density bonus situation, then we do have more discretion on that number.
Okay, so it's not,
yeah.
Okay, so it's not completely random. Obviously, there's a lot of things to look at. I keep forgetting about the fire access and that too. So
yeah, and I just wanted to note that it is possible that before this project actually moves forward to Planning Commission and Council, we may have a new height for this zone adopted.
Okay.
Just because that was, you know, a program as part of our housing element. So I just want to be clear to the neighbors that, you know, that change could be coming and would potentially affect this parcel.
Okay, so from the DRC's direction, I suppose, is I guess we're asking staff to work with the applicant on coming up with a height that you maybe bring it down a little bit somehow. Maybe it's the tower or whatnot. Is that appropriate direction?
I think so. I think we've heard, you know, to sort of look at solar access and those kind of things that relates to height, obviously. I think, you know, we'll direct the applicant to provide, you know, some more renderings and sketches from certain perspectives so we can truly understand what it feels like from the street level and from certain areas in the city, you know, along the external streets. So you know, I also know that they're going to be limited in terms of, you know, how many rooms they need to provide and how much area they have and what that ends up at. So I think between those, we're sort of the applicant's gonna come to a design of what they need to do, and then we can evaluate it based on that.
Okay, and as and since we did discuss it, the trash collection issue, I would like to see that figured out at the next time. Since this is coming back to the DRC, I'd like to see that figured out, because that's a real mystery to me. If they need 25 feet or 23 feet of clearance to be able to pick up a dumpster, I don't know how they're going to do it underground. And we don't want to do this where we go, well, you know what, we messed it up, so now we got to push these dumpsters out into the street. I don't think that would happen, but I would like to see how they're going to figure this out at the next DRC meeting.
Yeah, I think that will be a key component for them before they finalize their design.
Okay, Dwayne, you have something else?
Well, I guess what I heard was that we're probably not giving very clear input on the look of the tower. Now, I came in about 20 minutes late, so was there a rendering, like a reasonable rendering that shows that, especially from the front?
I'm not sure if we have a rendering that shows the tower. We have, I think we're looking mission style in general, and then this is the hotel from, I think, the Santa Barbara elevation.
Okay. Anything else, Dwayne?
No, I'm just, this is much clearer than what I can see on my blurry printouts here. You know, I could see the entryway looks okay. Probably needs to be that little portico at the bottom there probably needs to be a little more interesting for, you know, because we're talking about the way something looks when you come into town. That's what we're looking at, right? Essentially, is that look. That would be the corner.
Oh, I guess that is on the corner there, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I know we've kind of looked at things like that, and I'm just giving input since I didn't get to see this. And then the corner dome, so that would be towards the freeway. It looks like that'd be the west end, I believe. Looks more like a silo. So, you know, that's like, you see what I mean, Mark?
That's a grain silo. Yeah, I see it now.
Yeah, so things like that, you know, probably are the direction to get rid of that look, or some detail that changes it so it doesn't look that way. Like I said, these are rather
well, yeah, I think for me it's the shape of the dome for some reason. It's obviously a different shape than City Hall's dome, and there's a number of ways to do it. That's just what sticks with me. It's just, if somebody mentioned it has a Russian influence, and I can totally see that. It you know, not that I don't like Russian stuff, you know, they make good vodka, but this just doesn't seem a Atascadero to me as much as the City Hall does. But anyhow, go ahead.
No, that's, I just was doing some off the cuff reflection there. That's fine.
Yeah, Emily, did you have more to add?
I did, kind of on that same note. I just noticed that, you know, all of the example images provided by Ted's team of specifically with the mission design, what would be like a bell tower, they all have squared and sometimes squared with chamfered structural elements with a rounded dome on top. And I think, for me at least, that's maybe one of the things I'm struggling with, is that in this design, all of the towers are reached by a rounded element, and perhaps, you know, bringing it back to something that looks more like the other buildings in town that I do like more. It might help if we could, if they were open to it, try squaring off at least the structural element of each of those towers and keeping the dome rounded. It may look more like our City Hall and more like these images.
Okay. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
Moving down here, let's see. Heather, I don't know if Heather doesn't have any. You have anything else, Heather? I lost your picture, but I see your name there. All right, so I think we've all weighed in on this. Do we have enough for staff to work with the applicant on further adjustments to this?
Yes, I think we do.
Okay. All right. I don't know. Let's see. Where's Ted? Ted, if you're still on, thank you for your time. You know, good luck with the next rendition on this thing. I think you got a good project here, but it's bold and it's going to be a difficult one. So, all right. So moving on. Thank you, everybody, for all that good information. What do we got? So committee reports, committee member comments and reports. Does anybody have a comment or report or anything they need to bring up? Heather, Dwayne, Emily?
Nope.
And not I either. Okay, so director's report. Phil, what do we got?
I don't think we have anything on our next potentially scheduled agenda for December. So we might have a clear month moving forward for DRC. Plenty of projects in the works that we're working on. We've got a couple new applications that we'll be putting together, but it might be January before we get back to the DRC. But if you have any questions about development projects around the community, I'd be happy to answer those.
I have none. Looks like Heather has a question.
It's the worst to do this on my phone, so I have to black out the video. Barrel Creek, where are we on Barrel Creek?
We don't have an application from Barrel Creek yet. In fact, we're going to be reaching out to them this week to kind of, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Because yeah, we haven't heard from them in a couple of months at all. And kind of curious what's going on with that. I know that they were working on some traffic studies and slowly moving forward. They did some community outreach a couple months back. But yeah, we don't have an application from them since we went to the city council for their authorization.
Okay, and then there's a partial on Ramon that I think you're in communications with on a property that's for sale, zone public.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we are.
As long as you have, oh, I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions for Phil? All right, looks like nothing else. Anything else, Phil?
I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. This was a good meeting, and meeting adjourned till the next scheduled one. It was the 9th, but looks like there's nothing there, so we'll hear from staff. So goodbye,
Okay.
everybody.
All right.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
You guys.
Bye.
Bye.